The story begins not in a battlefield, not in the roar of war drums, but in the quiet corridors of Thanjavur, where the early sun painted golden streaks on stone pillars, and a young girl walked with a confidence that made even seasoned ministers lower their eyes. She was Kundavai Pirāttiyār, daughter of Sundara Chola, sister of Arulmozhi Varman. But even before the world knew the name Raja Raja Chola, the palace whispered something else. The princess is different. From childhood, Kundavai absorbed knowledge with a hunger that startled her tutors. Literature, philosophy, statecraft, diplomacy, temple administration, subjects usually reserved for crown princes. Yet the little girl sat there, spine straight, eyes sharp, questioning every lesson. Unlike other royal children, she didn't grow up believing she deserved respect. She grew up determined to earn it. In the evenings, while servants lit oil lamps, Kundavai walked through the palace gardens where sculptures of ancient queens stood silent. Sembian Mahadevi, Kembian Madevi, Nandini Devi. She touched the cold stone and whispered, "One day, I will build a legacy greater than you all." But outside the palace walls, the empire was shaking. Enemies circled the Cholas, vultures waiting for weakness. Court politics was a game of venom, and chaos spread like wildfire after Aditya II's death. Yet inside the kingdom's darkest moment, something unexpected happened. Kundavai didn't crumble. She stepped forward. At an age when most royal girls learned etiquette, Kundavai learned loyalty, betrayal, and survival. She observed ministers lie, generals switch sides, and nobles gamble with the kingdom's fate. Every night she memorized the mistakes of men who called themselves kings. This clarity, this early apprenticeship under chaos, forged her mind into steel. And deep inside, she made a vow to herself. I will preserve this kingdom. I will shape its future. And when my brother rises, no force in the world will stop us. People in the court began to notice. Her words were not childish opinions. They were predictions that came true. A minister once mocked her suggestion about strengthening inland temple networks. Months later, the kingdom faced unrest, exactly the kind she had warned about. Whispers spread. Some said she had divine insight. Others said she had the mind of a king. When Arulmozhi Varman, the future Raja, visited the palace after his victories in Sri Lanka, the siblings met like equals, not royalty. He spoke of battle formations, strategies, and ocean winds. She responded with cultural influence, diplomatic pathways, resource control, and people management. Two minds. One shared destiny. That night, watching her brother Kundavai, realized something powerful. He can conquer the world, but I will guide the world he conquers. Thus began the rise of a woman who would become the silent architect of the greatest empire South India ever saw. A princess whose influence would stretch across the Bay of Bengal, Indian Ocean, and Arabian Sea, even though she never commanded a ship, never wielded a sword, never claimed a throne. Her power was different, quiet, calculated, and unstoppable. This was the birth of the Queen of Three Seas. When Arulmozhi Varman returned from his early naval expeditions, the palace celebrated a warrior. But Kundavai saw something else, the future of an empire, still raw, still unshaped, needing guidance. It was said that the two siblings rarely needed words. Where others spoke in sentences, Kundavai and Arulmozhi spoke in glances. She could sense when his victories made him overconfident. He could tell when her silence was a warning. Together, they formed a dual force the Chola court had never seen. A prince with the heart of a lion, and a princess with the mind of a strategist. Most nights, long after the ministers retired, Kundavai and Arulmozhi sat in the palace's open terrace, towers of Thanjavur glimmering in the moonlight. Arulmozhi would describe the political fractures across Tamilakam, Pandya's regrouping in the south, Chera's tightening alliances in the west, Western Chalukyas plotting in the Deccan. Kundavai listened, not as a sister, but as a seasoned analyst. And then she spoke. A king who only reacts to threats will always be defeated. You must create a world where they react to you. This was the beginning of a new political doctrine. The Cholas would set the game, not follow it. Historians often credit Raja Raja for his bold moves, But the seed of half those ideas was planted in conversations like these. If Arulmozhi's strength was the sword, Kundavai's was the spoken word. She built relationships with the noble families that had once wavered in loyalty after the death of Aditya II. Instead of punishing them, she won them over through respect, through negotiation, through understanding their fears. In the records, this appears as peaceful internal consolidation. But in truth, it was Kundavai's political brilliance, her ability to read the motives of men better than they could read themselves. When Arulmozhi became Raja Raja Chola, he inherited not a fragile kingdom, but a united nation. Because Kundavai stitched every broken thread with her own hands, Kundavai believed that power didn't come only from armies, it came from identity. She revitalized Tamil literature, brought scholars into the court, supported bronze sculptors, dancers, poets, and teachers. She understood something only a handful of rulers ever realized. When people are proud of who they are, they defend their land with their lives. The rebirth of Chola culture, later seen in great temples, inscriptions, and art, didn't begin with Raja Raja's throne. It began in Kundavai's vision. One night, as trade ships returned from Srivijaya, Kundavai asked a question so simple, yet so revolutionary. Why should the oceans belong only to traders? Why not to kings? Arulmozhi looked at her, stunned. Until then, the sea was a path for commerce, not empire. Kundavai saw beyond. She saw in India, connected by water, a Tamil influence that flowed from Nagapattinam to Java. That night planted one of the greatest seeds of the Chola age. The concept of naval dominance, the very idea that later allowed Rajarajan, and especially Rajendra Chola, to rule the Bay of Bengal and beyond, originated in a conversation with Kundavai. When the coronation of Raja Raja Chola was announced, the court exploded with celebration. Yet people noticed something unusual. While generals, ministers, and nobles congratulated the new king, Raja Raja himself walked to only one person first. His sister. He bowed ever so slightly, a gesture that spoke 1,000 words. "Without you, I would not be here," she answered with a soft smile. Not seeking recognition, not claiming glory. Her victory was in the rise of the empire, not in her name being carved on stone. And so, as the new king ascended the throne, Kundavai quietly took her position, not beside him, but behind him. The place where true power lived. The Cholas had always lived with the sea. Fishermen worshipped it, traders depended on it, but no one truly understood its power, except Kundavai. Long before Rajendra's famed naval expeditions, long before Raja Raja built the fleet that shook the Bay of Bengal, there was a young princess standing on the shores of Nagapattinam, watching foreign ships glide in with the confidence of kings. Arab dhows, Chinese junks, Malay vessels from Srivijaya, all entering Indian waters freely. Kundavai felt something that day, a quiet indignation. These seas touched Chola soil. Why should foreigners rule them? This moment shaped the maritime destiny of the empire. Kundavai noticed patterns others ignored, how foreign traders mapped coastal villages, how some ports leaked sensitive information, how distant kingdoms used trade as a tool of influence. She returned to Thanjavur with a conviction. Trade is not just business, it is diplomacy, it is intelligence, and it can be a weapon. When she shared her observations with Rajarajan, it struck him like lightning. Kundavai didn't speak in abstract theories. She offered a plan. Strengthen coastal fortifications, protect merchant guilds with state support established. Chela-approved trade unions develop shipyards in Kavarpattinam, in Arumugam Bay, build diplomatic ties with Sri Lanka, Kadaram, and Java train warriors in naval combat. And above all, create a fleet that answered only to the Cholas. Arulmozhi listened. Rajendra, still a child, listened even more. They both knew this was not the mind of a princess. This was the mind of a maritime visionary, Rajendra Chola, the boy who would one day rule from Tamilakam to the Malay Peninsula. Spent much of his youth under Kundavai's watch. She didn't just teach him literature or philosophy. She taught him to think like a global leader. She explained the behavior of foreign merchants, the political games of island nations, the hidden ambitions behind gifts from distant courts. Rajendra grew up believing something every other Indian ruler had ignored. The sea is not a barrier, The sea is a highway, a belief planted by Kundavai. When he later built the greatest naval empire South Asia ever saw, his generals said he had a second sight for ocean strategies. That sight was Kundavai's lessons carried in his heart. Kundavai used her influence to revive and reform key ports. Nagapattinam Gateway to Southeast Asia Kavarapattinam. Pumpur, cultural and commercial hub, Tranquil Bar Coast, security and scout zone, Sri Lanka's coastal entry points, future staging grounds. She insisted on improved lighthouse systems, standardized tariffs, Chola merchant guilds, Anaruver security, trained coastal administrators, bilingual trade officers, diplomatic envoys traveling with merchant ships. This was not just economic planning. This was state-controlled maritime expansion. By the time Ragarajan came to power, Kundavai had already built the infrastructure for a naval empire. He only had to ignite the spark. Court poets often wrote that Kundavai had a gift. She could predict the behavior of kingdoms across the sea just by observing the changes in trade and the tides. When foreign ambassadors came bearing gifts, ministers watched the jewels. Kundavai watched the envoys. Their hesitation, their urgency, their subtle shifts in tone. She saw opportunities and threats in places others saw only gold. Her analysis became the backbone of Chola foreign policy. The Cholas did not conquer blindly. Their movements, their alliances, their naval bases, all were strategically aligned with her readings of the Indian Ocean world. When merchants returned from Java and Srivijaya, they brought stories of a Tamil princess who understood their world better than their own kings. When diplomats from Sri Lanka visited the Chola court, they realized the most dangerous conversations were not with the king, but with the princess. And when generals planned the earliest naval missions, they requested audience with her, not out of formality, but out of respect. Never held an admiral's title. She never stepped on a warship. She never commanded a battle. But everyone who sailed under the Chola flag carried her influence with them. Kundavai didn't rule the oceans from the deck of a ship. She ruled them from the corridors of Thanjavur. And that is how she became the unseen queen of the Bay of Bengal, the Indian Ocean, and the Arabian Sea. History remembers Kundavai as a strategist, a political mind, a maritime visionary. But beneath that brilliance was a woman with depth, choices, sacrifices, and an emotional world as vast as the empire she helped shape. This isn't about power. It is about the heart of the woman who held the empire together. When the time came for her marriage, every royal family, from the Pandras to the Rashtrakutas, attempted to win Kundavai's hand. They wanted her not for love, but for the alliances she brought. Kundavai refused them all. Instead, she chose Vandiyathevan, a Vanna clan prince, brave, clever, loyal, but nowhere near the power of the royal houses courting her. People whispered behind closed doors, a princess as powerful as Kundavai, choosing a mere prince. Kundavai never cared for the throne of another kingdom. She cared for a man who respected who she was, not what she represented. It was a marriage of equals, a rare concept in the age they lived in. Yet even after marriage, Kundavai made it clear, her identity, her purpose, her loyalty would remain tied to the Chola throne. And Vandiyathevan understood something no one else did. He didn't marry a princess. He married a force of nature. After Arulmozhi ascended the throne as Raja Raja Chola, the palace found itself looking toward a child who would become the next great ruler, Rajendra. His mother had passed away early, and in a world filled with politics and plotters, he needed someone unshakable. Kundavai stepped in, not as an aunt, as a mentor, a shield, a guide. She shaped Rajendra's mind the way a sculptor shapes stone, patiently, purposefully, seeing the emperor hidden inside the boy long before others did. While Raja Raja taught him war, Kundavai taught him statecraft, cultural pride, diplomacy, and the oceanic worldview. The balance created a titan. Later, when Rajendra built the greatest Asian naval empire of his age, he carried in him the lessons she whispered on quiet evenings. Rule the land with justice. Rule the sea with vision, but rule your own mind with discipline. In an age where royal women were confined, Kundavai redefined what a woman could be. She established learning centers for girls, Ayurvedic hospitals led by women healers, temple-based educational systems, textile guilds run by women administrators, positions for women in palace management and archival work. For her, progress wasn't in titles or power. It was in creating opportunities for those who had none. The Chola Empire's cultural renaissance, music, dance, sculpture, temple architecture, all carried her touch. Every stone in the Brihadisvara temple echoes not just the vision of Raja Raja, but the quiet guidance of the woman who stood behind him. Whenever court disputes became messy, ministers often said, "Ask the princess. She will know what is right." Her sense of justice was legendary. She protected the weak, challenged corrupt officers, and ensured temples acted as centers of community care, not political puppets. A single word from her could end a feud or spark a reform. Some rulers leave their mark through conquest. Kundavai left hers through character. Despite being the mind behind kings, the guide of a future emperor, and the architect of oceanic strategy, Kundavai never claimed the title that history would have gladly given her, queen. She chose instead to remain Pirāttiyār, the princess who ruled without ruling. A woman whose influence was so vast that even the stone inscriptions of Thandover mention her with reverence rarely given to women of her time. Her legacy grew not because she demanded it, but because she earned it. Kundavai was many things: a thinker, a reformer, a visionary, a sister, a mentor, a wife. But above all, she was the soul of the empire she helped shape. The woman who stood behind two of the greatest kings in Indian history, yet remained greater than both in wisdom. Empires rise, empires fall. Kings carve their names into stone, only for the stone to weather away. But there are legacies that refuse to fade. Legacies born not from conquest, but from vision. Kundavai Pirāttiyār's story doesn't end with her lifetime. It begins there, because the world she shaped politically, culturally, and oceanically continued to breathe long after she left the halls of Thanjover. Raja Raja's administrative brilliance, Rajendra's naval supremacy, the economic boom, the temple renaissance, the rise of Tamil global identity. These achievements are attributed to kings, but look deeper and you see the threads she wove. Her diplomatic groundwork made Raja Raja's empire stable. Her education of Rajendra forged the mind of a world conqueror. Her patronage of scholars sparked literary excellence. Her support for artisans birthed the finest bronzes in Indian history. Reforms for women advanced social progress by centuries. Her maritime vision charted the path for Chola dominance across oceans. Kundavai didn't just influence history, she engineered it. After her, the Chola Empire didn't simply expand. It transformed into something the subcontinent had never seen. A dual empire, one on land and one across the oceans. Rajendra's legendary naval expedition to Srivijaya was not an accident, nor a burst of kingly ambition. It was the logical culmination of the worldview Kundavai planted in him as a boy. A worldview that said, oceans are not distances, they are bridges. And when Rajendra built Gangakonda Cholapuram, every stone, every inscription, every policy carried a faint echo of the princess who had raised him. Centuries passed, trade routes changed, kingdoms dissolved. But one thing remained constant. The Bay of Bengal continued to be influenced by Tamil cultural flows in language and art, in traditions, in temple architecture. From Sri Lanka to Sumatra, from Thailand to Cambodia, the ripple effects of Chola maritime expansion still exist today. And behind that maritime rise was the mind of Kundavai, the woman who first understood that seas could be claimed with ideas before they were claimed by ships. Kundavai's focus on education for women, healthcare systems, temple-based community welfare, economic opportunities for artisans, preservation of literature and knowledge became the foundation of a society that remained strong even when dynasties shifted. Her reforms outlived her father Rajendra Chola, her brother Raja Raja Chola, her nephew and protege Rajendra Chola, and the generations of rulers that followed. Because she didn't build structures, she built systems. And systems endure. History often forgets women, especially women who wielded power quietly. But Kundavai defied even that, in inscriptions found across Tamil Nadu. Her name appears with reverence reserved only for the greatest, Kundavai Pirāttiyār, who shone like a jewel among women. The princess whose wisdom guided kings, she who uplifted the realm through dharma and intellect. No other woman in South Asian history is documented with such consistent honor. Her influence was so profound that even stone, the most stubborn storyteller, could not ignore her. Imagine her in the twilight of her life, a woman who never wore a crown, yet shaped an empire greater than most crowned queens. A woman who never commanded armies, yet defined a naval age. A woman who walked behind kings, yet walked ahead of her time. Kundavai Pirāttiyār, the strategist, the mentor, the reformer. The visionary was not just the sister of Raja Raja Chola, she was the mind behind the Golden Age, the soul behind the empire, the queen of the Bay of Bengal, the Indian Ocean, and the Arabian Sea, without ever claiming the title. Her power did not roar, it resonated. Her legacy did not command, it guided, and her story does not end. It continues in temples and scripts, in oceanic history, in cultural memory, and in the very idea that a single brilliant woman can alter the destiny of nations without lifting a sword.